All right. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks a lot for coming over to this session. Our session today is about building and growing a game with your audience in mind. And today I'm with three valuable people from three great companies. Uzair from Unico Studio, Chris from Quali, and Greg from Liftoff. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually start with a funny question, and I'm going to ask everyone, what's your favorite game? We can start from there.
My favorite game is like Pro Evolution Soccer.
Okay.
It's a console game.
Cool. Do you have any favorite mobile game, actually?
A mobile game like Subway Surfers.
Subway Surfers, okay.
Yes, I like it a lot.
Great. It's a runner. Chris?
My favorite game is definitely. Hello. My favorite game is.
I think we're having a technical problem here. Yeah.
Mic problem, I guess.
Yeah.
Can I start on it? Cool, is that working?
I think it's
yeah,
working.
brilliant. Cool, so my favorite game is The Witcher, specifically The Witcher 3, but The Witcher series as a whole. Really got me into gaming and everything. In terms of mobile games, I've got to say I'm a big fan of one of the ones that I've worked on, Build Your Vehicle. I'm a big fan of that. I've played a lot of that, not just because I have to, but for fun too. So.
Yeah. That's great. It's good that you're building something that you really like at the same time too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's the best thing about working in the games industry is doing what you love, right?
Yeah.
So working in what I do, I get the opportunity to do things that I love to do all the time.
Great. And Greg, what
Yeah,
about you?
pretty similar to these guys. I think growing up really heavy in the Pro Evo and then defected into FIFA at some point. Love the open world as well, so Cyberpunk and Grand Theft Auto. I haven't played a lot as a teenager, but if I was to pick up a game, it'd probably be one of those three.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Like you guys are all like very like mid-core kind of like players, right? I'm not. I'm more of a casual player, but yeah, great. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna cover how to select an audience for building a game, and then how you actually keep that audience in mind, and and also how to build the game around it, as well as how to actually design your user acquisition and monetization methods for it. So my first question is going to be, we can start there again with you. How do you select an audience when starting a new game? Do you have a methodology for that, and what are the factors that you take into account?
Yeah, thanks, Aisu. If it's a new game, it's a new category and new genre, we definitely rely on market intelligence tools. We look at the demographics for the top games and the distribution of the paying users and the non-paying users, and also we look at the interest as well. That's one thing. And if it's a genre that we are more familiar with, that we do games, then we look at our own data as well. We listen to the feedback from the users of our own games. And we are trying to look at, did we successfully monetize this audience? If it's a tile matching game, this was mostly for female audience, 35 plus or 25 plus. Did we successfully monetize this audience? And yeah, that's basically our strategy.
Yeah, so you're basically looking at previous games of yours and moving with that kind of audience and making kind of similar games. Is that kind of an approach you're taking actually?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and I think you have some different methodology. We spoke about that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. So starting out mostly focused on the hyper casual. So hyper casual is a bit different. We look at a few things when we do this stuff. There is there are trends in the industry that we can track in hyper casual, and we do a lot of that at Quali. We also look at previous games, same as you guys. Especially if they're in the same kind of subgenre, say we're looking at runners or something like that. We'll look at other runners that we've had and see how they performed, seeing what they were most impactful for in terms of ads as well. So looking at the initial CPI test and seeing what the most impactful moments were on those ads, and going even a little bit deeper and looking at where people dropped off watching those ads as well. So maybe it was the first 5 seconds, maybe it was they watched the entire ad, where that kind of percentage lies, where we see massive drop-offs as well. So we can kind of see, ascertain what the most important part of that ad was and how we can bring that into our new game and focus on that mechanic. When we go into casual, though, we're looking at more market intelligence as well. And same on hyper casual too. You know, we're looking at Sensor Tower, we're looking at things like game refining when it goes to casual. And, you know, we're able to see, you know, what the other games are that are in the charts right now, or maybe fall into the same genre as the game we're looking to make. And, you know, we can track the best performing videos through Sensor Tower and stuff like that. And we're able to see, you know, a lot of performance data from our own previous games and, you know, kind of use that to modify our plan and modify our concept at that very early stage.
Yeah, so actually you're saying that you have kind of like the game genre or subgenre in your mind, and you're actually moving with the audience, like selecting an audience like accordingly. Is that how that goes with you?
Kind of. We kind of originally build off an original idea mechanic and then build that into a game loop, and then we compare and contrast that with other things we've tried. Maybe we've done, you know, 10, 20, 30 other tests that month of a similar mechanic, and we go, cool, this doesn't seem to be working at the moment. Let's maybe pivot this mechanic to another type of subgenre, because the thing is, when you go to hyper casual, there's a lot of movement you can make. Whereas in casual, you know, you're building these games over years, so you're not really tracking what's trending right now. You're trying to predict what's going to be the next hot trend, and you're looking at, you know, Game Refinery and, you know, comparing the games on there with ones that you've created on there as well in the Game Explorer. So there's a lot of ways that you can preemptively start planning out how you're going to make this game kind of, you know.
Yeah, and that's going to be like exactly my next question. So what are the, like, you know, things that you consider or take into account when you're designing a game that is actually going to appeal to your selected audience?
So, like, one thing I'm going to say is player archetypes is a thing that you really need to pay attention to. If you're looking at a certain genre of game, you want to make sure you know who your players are, not just how old they are, not just what games they play, but why they play those games, what those personality traits that those players are actually, you know, actually have, and, you know, engage with that game on. So you can look at certain games, you know, and you'll see that certain people, you know, like to be king of the hill, like Playrix, for example, or Homescapes. Like a lot, I think it's like 25% of their players want to be king of the hill, and that's a really important thing as to why they play that game, because they like to feel that kind of power dynamic there, and, you know, they like to be the best at what they're doing. So there's this planning that goes into it where, you know, you look at all these different types of players and other games, similar genres and stuff like that you might be planning for, and kind of anticipating how that might change over the next couple of years as well, during development anyway.
Yeah, and also, Uzair, you guys have a lot of, like, you know, different types of games in your portfolio, and obviously, like, all of these games have different audience. And now, like, when you're making a new game and selecting after you kind of like have an idea about the audience you want to, like, appeal to, how do you then, like, what are the factors that you take into account when you're designing that particular game, for example?
When we decide about our target audience, and when we have a good idea about what our audience is going to look like, then, for instance, for the word games, we're trying to focus on a more calming gameplay, and for the casual games, more appealing game assets, like if it's going to be appealing for our female audiences, our art team is doing everything to make it like more shiny, more attractive. And if we are focusing on an action game, then and all the music, background, and all is like trying to make it more competitive, look like more competitive. These are the things like we focus on during the production and development once we decide about our audience. And plus, we are looking at the monetization elements, having our audience in mind. Where should we like put the rewarded videos, and when we should offer remove ads options, and our users, should we offer like offline play mode or not? Or how often we should like offer certain in-app items, in-app purchase offerings. So these are the things we look at after we decide on our target audience.
Yeah, and like, do you have any like previous information about it, or like how do you actually make your research on who prefers, like which audience prefers what kind of, like, let's say monetization? Not prefer, but like is more inclined to, let's say, like, do you guys have any insights about it, or is it like from previous games Could
Yeah,
you give us?
exactly. With the sequel, we have the brain test, and we have the brain test series as well. For instance, when we are making like the brain test 2, we looked at the brain test 1 data extensively, and the audience feedback, reviews, and all the things from our existing audience. Then we made brain test 2 more as story-based games, and then a more character-based game, because for instance, we made a mini survey on brain test 1 and asked the audience, which characters did you like the most? And then based on that, we built another game. And for the brain test 3, and now we're working on brain test 4. Historical data is important, and listening to the audience is very important in a new game creation.
Yeah. Do you have any additions to that, Chris?
I mean, I'd mirror a lot of what he says. Like, historical data is really important, but it's important to understand how markets do change and how those players change. Because no matter who you are, no matter who your players are, guess what? People age, they change, they have different motivations. So if you want to retain those same audiences that you had in your first game, that might be those spenders, that might be those whales that you're looking for, you need to look at where they might be now. So if you're working on casual games, for example, things will change over time. So you've got to be aware that, your audience is aging as well, and maybe, bring some more kind of mature, not mature is not the right word I'm using here, but some more kind of, more targeted for slightly older ages, maybe a couple of years, you're just moving a little bit at a time, but it's worth to be aware of these things, because quite often, you'll see people that, identify themselves as spenders in games, and then as they reach a certain point, they might kind of drop off that, so you need to re-engage them in a new way possibly, or you're just trying to find that same audience, but at the same age range again, and that's a good way to look at your historical data and use that as a beneficial point for you moving forward.
Yeah, that's actually great insight. And we spoke about monetization here, and I want to ask about that too. And like, how do you actually design the monetization when you're thinking about the audience? Now we spoke about like the design, but obviously, the game needs to monetize. So like, can you tell me more about it? Like, how do you actually, what are the factors that you take into consideration for monetization, again, with the audience in mind?
Sure, so I can talk a bit about this. So we take quite a lot of factors into account when we look at how to monetize our games. So in hyper-casual, we are 90% ads, right?
Yeah.
99% ads, maybe even, pretty much every hyper-casual developer will iterate this as well, is that we mostly focus on ads, and it's important that those placements do not affect gameplay too much, and that they also are, for rewarded ads anyway, they're very important for players in terms of, do they feel like they get enough from that rewarded ad? Like, is it worthwhile me watching a 30-second ad to get A from the game? But then when you move it into more casual games, your ad revenue, if you have ad revenue, because some games don't, there's a lot of casual games that don't have any ads in them at all and completely focus on IAPs. You need to make sure that you're not focusing on that, you're focused on the IAP stuff, because that's usually what's going to monetize your casual game. And you need to be very aware of, does this amount of money make it worthwhile for the player to start paying money? Because every person out there is going to have a certain amount of money that they would spend on a game a month, right? Whether that's $1, $5, $10, or a couple $1,000s. There are people out there that do spend $10,000 on a game a month. It's not something I do, but it's something some people do, right? So you need to be aware of like who your players are, and make sure that you see them in different layers, right? You're going to have the people that are free to play and might watch an ad here or there. You're going to have people that do spend loads of money, but you need to be aware of what their motivations are to spend that money, and making sure that they are treated as such. So your higher spenders you're going to treat very well, of course, and you should treat everyone very well, but there'll be a nice balance that you have between what do the big spenders spend on and what do the little spenders spend on, and how you can convert those little spenders to big spenders, or how you can convert people from not spending at all to starting to spend. And it's focusing on, conversion techniques, so looking at developers and looking at your players and understanding what would make them buy that first IAP. Maybe it's a special offer, maybe there's a part that they find very difficult that other players don't, that you could use to help them along. And there's different steps to this, but it's a really good idea to talk to your audience, use things like not quizzes, sorry, questionnaires and stuff like that to get feedback from your audience and reward them for those questionnaires as well, because you'll find out more about your players the more you talk to them. So when you go into casual, community management's important too. And you'll get feedback on whether or not they think something is unfair or fair as well. And that's a really good way to kind of, as you start growing your game, plan future live ops ahead. But when you're starting out, it's good to kind of understand who you think your audience are. Take a look at Game Refinery, compare a game you might see similar, see what monetization strategies they've used, see how those monetization strategies have changed over the years as well.
And I actually have a related question to that. Like, do you think like some audiences are like they better monetize with IA or IAP? Like, could you give maybe some insights if you have any about it?
Yeah, sure. So I don't want to talk all the time, but
I can chime in for a bit.
Chime in for that, Greg.
But I guess I want to pick up on some of your points. You mentioned about the audience being ever changing, and I guess a preconception that if you're in the casual space, is there really a room for IAA in terms of monetization? But taking a step back completely, I think that ever changing audience is really important to remember. And some of the trends that we're observing, especially in the casual space, is that there is definitely a lot of room, even if your app is core IAP driven and your goals around ROAS and ROI. We're seeing a lot of trends, even some of the bigger established casual partners move into the IA and really embrace it. But for example, it will be for now quite supplementary. So it will never go to a high percentage, right? So it's something that's being embraced. We're looking at a time where a recession's coming. We've just come out of a period of a pandemic where there was a lot of spend in app. There is a bit of a contraction, and we do encourage publishers and developers alike to really have an open mind about where their revenue is coming from. So it might not always be IEP, but equally, when we look at specifically on audiences as well, there is obviously a mix of payers and non-payers, and what we do tend to see is when typically a casual developer publisher is moving in to ad monetization, you've got to look at what are those non-payers doing? Are they more susceptible to ads? Are your payers susceptible to ads? And it could be those smaller ticket users, the $1 purchases, for example, that might be worthwhile.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point there. I think you can quite obviously see that ads are going to be more utilized, not just in mobile games, but across the entire market, right? I mean, I imagine in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll see some game, maybe it's a Call of Duty or a Fortnite, it will have double XP for an ad watch, right? Maybe you'll get the double XP for an hour or something like that, but it wouldn't surprise me to see monetization like that bleed into other games, and the same in casual games too. I mean, I can imagine, you buy an IAP and then you watch an ad on top of that and you get a little bit more or something like that. It's a nice little bit extra or something along those lines. And I can think there could be a nice symbiotic relationship between ads and IAPs.
Yeah, and I know that like at Unico you guys have like kind of like hybrid games, and like your audience is obviously you have some different monetization strategies. So maybe you can tell.
Yeah, maybe I can add what Craig and Chris said, and we can approach the opposite way as well. And most of our games are like in-app ad heavy games. But having said that, we are trying to have a good amount of in-app purchases as well. And when you have mostly in-app ad revenue games, that 10%, even 5% in-app purchases makes a difference. So what we did like last year or in the beginning of this year, can we increase our purchase revenue even more in it? And we all know that with the increasing eCPMs, competition, eCPI, that 5% margin, even a 3% margin makes a difference. Like we have it for the brain test, we have 20% in-app purchases. We rolled out some updates, in-app purchase updates, by tracking events, looking at the historical data, and looking at the user journey. We, at some critical point, we made some new in-app purchase offering, and we managed to increase our in-app purchase revenue 50%. That makes a huge difference for our user acquisition efforts, and that leaves a room for growth. So it goes both ways. If you have an IAP heavy game, you can always increase the in-app ads revenue. If you have an in-app ads heavy game, then you can definitely improve in-app purchase revenue.
Yeah. And speaking about user acquisition strategy, obviously like the monetization is going to be reflected, like the game design and like audience, all of these play a vital role in the user acquisition strategy too. And how does that happen at Unico? Like how do you actually strategize your UA again with your audience in mind?
I think it directly plays into the user acquisition strategy. First, did we do a good job at monetizing the audience in the best possible way? Like, do we have a optimized waterfall? Are we using the right networks? Are we using the correct mix of ad formats? And are we showing all the relevant in-app purchases, or are we showing the rewarded video offerings in the right places? And once we make sure these are okay, and knowing our audience and how it affects the user acquisition, how high CPIs can I afford in my campaigns? Like there are certain types of campaigns and networks that I know would be a perfect fit for our game's growth, like retention campaign in this network, purchase ROAS campaign in that SDK network, or like purchase ROAS campaigns in social networks, or ad ROAS campaigns in some channels. Can I afford these high CPIs with the existing monetization setup? Do I have a room for these type of campaigns? And we all know that there are certain sweet eCPM or eCPI spots. And once you pass that threshold, your UA campaigns are skyrocketing.
Well, I think we should talk outside. I think we might have a solution for you at some point.
Yeah, I know.
Safe to say. No, look.
That's correct.
And you spoke about having the right channel mix, and getting the basics right is really key. Okay, obviously you need your MMP, you need a good mediation platform, and you want obviously a user acquisition, a paid acquisition partner that can listen to all of the ad revenue, all right, and really find the sweet spot of driving revenue from those IAPs, the big ticket purchases, the smaller one, but also listen to that supplementary ad revenue that comes with it as well. So part of what we do, a big part of what we do at Liftoff is actually work with those customers. We spoke about those casual customers that are moving more into embracing IAA and AdMon, and really helping them on that journey in keeping that revenue distribution the same, even for paid acquisition. So a campaign setup might look like something of the following: having a whole mix of ad formats. So every ad format plays a part. When inventory cost is expensive, you need to keep your CPIs down with banners and interstitials. But equally, those longer form videos and the shorter form videos are going to maximize that engagement as well. So having that creative mix is super important, and having a partner that can listen to all of the revenue streams that you have in your app is absolutely key.
Yeah, I think just to go off that as well, I think that's really is key, because you want to be able to get insights from outside just your own company. You want to be able to learn about what other people are doing and how that might affect you. There's a lot going on at the moment, especially on Android. We're seeing certain things happening with ad placements and stuff like that. But if you talk to the right people, you find out there's nothing to be worried about. And it's really important to just kind of be aware of things. And I just wanted to circle back to something you said about seeing that much larger mix of revenue from IAA and IAP. I mean, we've got the rise of Arcade Idol and stuff like that. We've got a few titles that we've been doing, and we've seen a much larger IAP revenue than we've had in any of our other hyper-casual games, because this is the new hybrid casual, and we're having, we're designing the games around allowing players who want to spend, and it's becoming a much more influential part of our monetization strategies now as well. And it's good to balance that with the IAA and understanding where those users are coming from, and how I can get the right users into those games, and which users are going to spend the money and which aren't, and which platforms they're going to come from, and how can I utilize those new revenue streams to make more content, to keep them in the game for longer, and increase those retention and playtime figures as well.
Yeah. When you were saying all of these, I was thinking, we spoke a lot about, design, we spoke about, UA and monetization. Obviously, these are all different parts, but they're all connected. And I'm feel like, we might want to speak a little bit about how you at least, enhance the communication between the product design teams and the marketing teams, and how do you actually maybe, like when you're especially building a new game, like targeting an audience, how these teams like work together to make the best game that would fit the right audience.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So I think it depends on a company-to-company basis, and obviously team-to-team basis. But what I found is that doing quite often stand-ups and making sure everyone's in the know, and we have good lines of communication. I'll say this in every talk I probably ever do, but communication is key for success. It doesn't matter what company you're in, where you are. If you're not communicating properly with your team, you're not going to be able to make a successful product. And it's really important to just make sure that everyone's on the same page, and we're using what we have knowledge-wise to influence our decisions on what needs to come next, and which teams need to be up and ready, and when we need to prepare new sprints and stuff like that. I found that keeping your marketing team in touch with your design team is priceless. There's so much potential in new forms of ads to do UA with that your game design team might not think of, because they are not marketers, and you want your marketing team to talk to them and say, hey, I want this feature, I want this on the back end so I can change this. And so you can create custom UA campaigns with these really nice videos, because that would have been in the game normally, but with the marketing team it is, and the marketing team allow you to get those lower CPIs because you've influenced the game, and it's just this beautiful circle of success with this communication happening again and again and again. And I've always found that if you're not talking to your team, if you're a team lead or something like that, make sure you speak to people on your team, because some of the best ideas come from people that might not be seniors. They might come from juniors. And don't be afraid to have round tables with juniors across teams as well, because it's a really good way to get ideas flowing and just building this communication cycle. Because don't separate your teams. Don't just be like, oh, this is marketing, they don't talk to design. Talk to them and have everyone on those teams talk to each other. Don't waste their time, but make sure there's communication going there and they're friendly, because you're able to use that creative potential from. Everyone here has got really creative people at their company, so you can find these ideas from anyone, anytime.
And what we also recognize is that, when the product teams actually and the marketing teams speak more often, maybe there are some product elements, design elements that the marketing team doesn't necessarily see in the production phases, which could actually spark some ideas, and and bringing that together with, the, let's say, player motivations, and, actually bringing all of these together to understand how, which game design elements actually affect which player archetypes or motivations, then also affects the monetization and UA strategy. And these are all loops, right? They're feeding each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess you have some additions to that.
Maybe I can add the creative aspect of these things. There's always a core audience. They are waiting for your game. And in addition to that, majority of the audience you're reaching out with your marketing activities, with your creatives. And this is the one valuable data and insight that you can capture from. As Chris said, there should be a two-way communication. And that an important aspect of this two-way communication is from marketing UA team to the product team. And what we can provide to the product and design team is that which kind of creative videos performs the best. It's easy to, with enhanced technologies of the networks, social networks, and the DSPs, and also the other networks, which creatives were more appealing to this audience? What type of concepts, teams had the highest CTR install rates? And can you, for instance, for some of our games, we tried new out of the game levels and concepts, and we said, could you incorporate this into the game to make it more appealing? And we are attracting users and audience with these type of videos, and it would be great if we can somehow include these in the gameplay as well. So that's a really good.
Yeah, that's the whole two-way street conversation is great, and we take it further. We like to have a three-way conversation at liftoff. On the creative side, for example, we've got a guy called Justin who's done a talk earlier today, and part of what he does is where he speaks with new customers, existing customers, and he will take their creatives and ingest them through a script, and he'll be able to understand what their predicted retention rates would be and what the performance would look like. So what I'm getting at is if you work with your paid acquisition partner or your channel to connect the creative team, the art directors, the creative studios with your own, and have a 360 feedback loop beyond the account teams and beyond the marketing teams. And we find this sort of relationship works really well, especially in the long term, and it really helps you to guide your creative strategy for the best.
Yeah, I think that's like having the partner, or the right, monetization and creative partner is definitely vital to succeed. It's like it's a whole package, right? It's just not like selecting the right audience or designing, but like having every piece, work together in the right way. We're kind of like at the end of our time, and I would like to thank you so much for this panel. If there is any questions, we're happy to answer. I can't really see if you guys are having hands up, but yeah, that's basically the end of session. Well, if you have any questions that you don't want to ask right now, and if you have something else, like just catch us at the event afterwards. Really valuable people with great insights. Thanks a lot for coming over and listening. Thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.